everyone, welcome to Berry Fun Adventures, episode 11. My name is Tanya and I'm coming to you from southeast Minnesota where my family and I run Firefly Berries, which is a pick-your-own-fruit farm specializing in strawberries and Concord grapes, as well as naturally dyed yarn that I dye myself with the plants that we grow on our farm. So welcome to the episode. I am glad to be back. It has been a busy week, so unfortunately I probably don't have as much knitting content or crafty content as I do sometimes, but a big thank you to everyone who has shopped my spring cleaning sale for Berry Fun Yarns. That is why I have been so busy. I've been having fun packaging up your orders and seeing what you've been putting together to create something beautiful, I am sure. So thank you very much. So outside of a big thank you, I don't really have anything else to share before I just get started with what I'm wearing and what I have been working on. So let's get to it. So what I'm wearing today, I am wearing two really, well, I wouldn't call them really old, but they're two of my older knits. First of all, the shawl I'm wearing is the Spectrum shawl by Joji Locatelli. It's a pretty old pattern of hers. And I knit this in Mineville Wool Project, which is a yarn I got through Simply Sock Yarn Company. I think it's out of Indiana. So it's a two-color shawl, and you start at, I believe, this end. It's blowing out a lot on the camera, but it's kind of a fun, I think it's called Spring Splendor. So you start here, and then you have kind of some color change, and then you have a little bit of a, I don't know if it's like a chevron. It's been so long since I made it, I can't remember exactly the construction, but you knit down, so it's Spring Splendor and Monte Cinto. And then you get to this bigger wide section here. Now, I was just learning when I made this. I think it was like 2017, maybe 2018. I was just learning that I am a loose knitter. So I didn't really think anything about trying, gauge. I thought, well, it's a shawl. I don't really need to get gauge. The only thing about not checking your gauge on a shawl is that you could run out of yarn. So I did not check my gauge at all, and so I started to run out of yarn. It was supposed to be different at the end. I mean, I think I can't remember, but I think the stripes do get larger, but not this large. So then at the end, I ran out of this Monte Cinto colorway, and I ended up having to just put a block of the Spring Splendor on, but I don't care. I like it. It still works, and I like the shawl. How it sits on my shoulders is very, very comfortable, and it's very easy to wear. So that's the shawl. And then the sweater I'm wearing is called the Malin Pullover, and it is by Isabel Kramer. I knit this. This was my very first sweater I knit for myself back in 2016, and I knit it out of Cascade 220. In just one of their gray colorways. Since then, my what are these called? Elbows have gotten holes in because I've worn it so much, so I did make some patches for it. Those were a part of a Joji Locatelli pattern. I can't remember what it was. I will link it below, though, for those of you who want to see. That's a super cute pattern, too. I have not made the whole sweater of that pattern yet, but I did make the patches. So I'm going to put this back on because it's in Minnesota. We are getting warmer. We have gotten up into the mid 40s, and tomorrow we're supposed to hit like 55 or something exciting like that, but I still feel cold, and I really like something on my neck. It keeps me warm. So yeah, so that's what I'm wearing. Finished objects. I actually did not finish any new objects, but I did refinish an object. That is, dropping things on the floor. My husband has been, I made him these socks. So this is the Hermione, I think it is, Hermione sock pattern. It's kind of a fun textured pattern. And I made him these last year. I can't remember. He's not had them for a whole season yet. I think I made him at the end of winter, so like a year ago, and he didn't really start wearing them a lot until this fall. But man, he has ripped through these socks. And this base is actually, it's a Berry Fun Yarns, and it is a Berry Tough Confetti, which is 85% superwash merino, 15% Donegal neps. And so it's these colorful tweedy bits. I don't know if you can see them on there. Nope, it's hard to see. You can see it in the heel maybe more. You can see the little colored neps in there. But so he has been ripping through these. First I had to do a patch on the heel. You can see the heel patch I made. And then he was starting to wear out on the bottom, so I did some duplicate stitching on there for him. And then his toes were completely pulling out at the toes. And he does we kind of tease him that he has rough feet, but he doesn't typically work through or wreck through socks very quickly. Occasionally he does, but I was sort of like, what did I do wrong with these socks? And so I thought about it for a while, but then I knit him, I just ripped back the whole toe. I thought I'm just gonna, because it was ripped out at the top, and then there were some really thin ones down below in the toe section, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna knit a whole new toe. So I put on matching toes. I ripped back to the toe decrease area, and then I did the whole toe. But while I was doing that, I realized that this yarn is, typically I use a very high twist, 80% merino, 20% nylon for his socks. And this one had a little less nylon, and the kind that the 80-20 I use has 400 yards per 100 gram skein. And this one is 438 yards to 100 grams. And I knit it in the same needle. So what I'm thinking is happening is that the yarn base is not quite as high of a twist, and it's a little bit thinner, and I didn't knit it at any tighter of a gauge, and so he's just wearing through it faster. So I've decided from now on he does not get anything that's less than like an 80-20 or maybe a Corriedale. That's a really hard wearing wool, but if I had any idea that I might make him a pair of cashmere socks someday, it's not happening, because I think he will just wear through them, and that is so frustrating. I don't mind fixing socks, after you've had them, or like the patches, but not even having a whole season's wear out of it is sort of, I don't know, it's sort of ridiculous to me. So I told him I fixed them, but if he rips through them again, I'm just gonna knit him another pair of socks, because it's just not worth the time it takes to keep repairing them if the base is not the right base for him. So yeah, so that's the only finished object or refinished object that I have this week. Because like I said, I was really busy with working on business stuff, farm stuff, and then schooling the kids and taking care of the family and things. But I do have a couple works in progress. I was very into well, let me show you this first. I'll show you the one sock project I was working on this week. I didn't think I was in the mood for socks, but then I kind of got to the heel, and there's something about when you get to the heel of a sock, whether you do it toe up or cuff down, it's like, yes, I'm halfway there, I'm gonna do this, and then you're like, oh, I don't have that much left to do. It's all about perception, I'm telling you. Knitting is about like this idea that we are almost done or we have a lot to go. So anyway, this is a pair of socks that I'm knitting for my son Ian, who's 16. And you can kind of see the little pattern. It is a slip stitch pattern that I made up myself. Maybe there's a pattern out there. I'm sure there is one that's similar to this already. But it is a knit 3 purl 1 cuff for about 1.5 inches. And then I did, I'm trying to remember, I think it was a knit 1, purl 1, knit 2. So it's a 4-stitch repeat. Knit 1, purl, no, not knit 1, purl 1. Knit 1, slip 1, knit 2, and then you repeat that around. And then I did that twice, so I slipped the stitches for 2 rows, and then I knit a solid row, and then I alternated where I was doing my slip stitches. So you can see the different, so there's a slip stitch here, and then here's the slip stitch, and it kind of goes back and forth. If you are interested in doing this pattern and you are comfortable with a basic sock, it is 64 stitches, and you could do it on any sock that is of 4, you can do a 4-stitch repeat in. But I have all the notes in my project page, which I'll link below, exactly what my patterning is on the sock. And I chose to I did stockinette on the back, and I chose to do the pattern on the front and the top. And then I did the typical traditional heel flap and gusset heel for him, because that's the one that fits the best. So yeah, so I did not do the slip stitching all the way around, because I know that when I do slip stitches, the sock tends to be tighter, and I didn't want it to not be able to get over his heel. So I don't know, by the time I finish these, maybe he won't want to wear them because it will be too warm, but he likes to hang out in our basement. He's sort of made his own like man cave, or almost man cave, because he's not quite a man. And it's colder down there. We have an unfinished basement, so maybe he will wear them well into spring. So this is, the yarn is Yarn Indulgences, and it is on their Z soft sock, which is 420 yards, 115 grams of fingering weight, 80% merino and 20% nylon. And it is the, I think it was called some kind of bat colorway. Oh, blue bat colorway. Yeah, so that's that one. And so I don't have too much. I have the rest of the foot. Maybe I'll finish this weekend and cast on the next one. I don't know, I've kind of been not pushing myself to do a certain number of any particular project. If I feel like knitting on it or crocheting on it, I pick it up. And if I don't, then I just do something else. I try not to get too caught up in trying to keep a schedule, because sometimes I think that's a great idea, and then I get too caught up in it and it stresses me out. So I have been trying not to do that. The other two things that I've been spending most of my time on are my crochet blankets. So I'll show you those quickly. The first one is the corner to corner crochet blanket. That's a temperature blanket based on the first year of my oldest son's life, the temperatures that year. And the pattern, I believe, is called, I followed it loosely, 2020 Temp Blanket. I'll write it on the screen for you. But I do have a project page, and it just involves, if you do something like this with a temperature blanket, make sure you do a gauge swatch and you figure out, you know, how big you want your blanket versus how many so in this instance, you get these little, get these little like squares that I do when you do the corner to corner. And it's like groups of 3 double crochets within there. So I do 35 of these little bumps for each day. That was based on my gauge and the math that I did to get the size blanket that I want. But if you don't do that before you start, your blankets could be way off in size, because, you know, if you're using fingering weight, obviously your blanket's going to be a lot smaller than worsted weight. If you're a tight or a loose crocheter, it's all going to vary. So anyway, I have finally gotten into the month of June. So my son was born at the end of March, and it's getting pretty big. You can see all the, oops, I'm pulling out my yarn. Let me get some extra string here. So you can see it's getting pretty big. I put a marker in. Here's where I was last time. I was where this little donut is here, a biscuit. So I did, I don't know, I guess that's about 3 inches or so, 4 inches. I did a lot of yellow. You can see this is, I think it's called brass heather, but last time I did a lot of this dark one, and now we're getting into a little bit warmer days. I think this temperature is like 67 to 75 or something like that. It's about 8 degrees. So reminder, if you have never done a temperature blanket before, and this is the first episode you're watching, when you do a temperature blanket, you need to create a bit of a chart here where it tells you what color you're going to crochet or knit based on the temperature of the day. So like here's brass heather, 67 to 75 degrees, and that's the color I do. So I started out down here in these greens colors. I've moved into a lot of blue, and now I'm up here into this section, and pretty soon I will get to move into the reds and oranges, which will be fun. It's fun to see how the colors change as the days go through. I am using Wool of the Andes Superwash. It's worsted 100% superwash wool, and I like it a lot. I really like the yarn. I would give the yarn 2 thumbs up, and I think I might even knit a sweater out of this sometime, or make a sweater for like my son to take to college with him so that he can throw it in the washing machine and not have to worry about, you know, not being able to wash it until he came home. And then I'm using an 3.75 millimeter size F crochet hook from Clover. Yeah. So I am liking that a lot. I don't know, there's just something when you're busy, at least for me when I'm busy, you know, these corner to corner or granny stripe blankets, these crochet things, they're very comforting, very relaxing, sort of like doing garter stitch. And I didn't really have, last time I podcast, I had my sweater that I was working on, and I did a little bit on it, but not enough to show you. But to have to count the rows with the decreases for the sleeves, I was just like not having it. I wasn't in the mood. So I didn't do that. So I did that crochet blanket, and then I have my other one, which is my fingering weight granny stripe blanket. This one I have not showed you in quite a long time. Let me see if I can find it here. And this one is just made up of lots of scraps of my fingering weight yarn left over from socks or shawls or whatever it is, but it's all superwash. I did make sure it was all superwash because I didn't want it to, you know, not be able to be washed in the washing machine. So this is getting bigger. Let me see where I was last time. You can kind of see. So I was where the sheepy is here last time. So I don't know, was that maybe like 2-3 inches? But you can see it's really quite long. And it's getting pretty big. It doesn't really fit on the screen completely. Anyway, yeah, so I put a little bit of work on that, which was really fun. And in case you're wanting a general pattern for that, that would be the Granny Stripes, I think it's called, and it's by Lucy of Attic 24. And that one I am crocheting on a C hook, another one of these Clover 2.75 millimeters. I love these crochet hooks. And then the last thing I have, works in progress on the needles, is something new I cast on since last time, and I don't know where I put my pattern, so I will pop a picture on the screen now. But this is the Spring Thing shawl, and it is by Espace Tricot up in Canada. And it is a beautiful shawl. It's a 1 skein shawl that is, so it starts out like this. I think it would call it asymmetrical. It's all garter, and then you put an edging on that requires 120 gram mini. So you could use one of my sock sets, or you could use some scraps to go with a single skein that you have in your stash. So a very versatile way to use it. So this is mine. And this is a Berry Fun Yarns colorway. I'm trying to get the best lighting for you. And this was kind of an oops colorway, but I do think that I'm going to try to recreate it and it will come back. It's sort of like Under the Sea, but it is a lot lighter. It's very different than the deeper blue Under the Sea that I carry in the shop. So I have plans for this, and you will hopefully see this back in the shop soon because it is a beautiful colorway. It's dyed with marigolds and logwood and cochineal, and then a very light amount of indigo. So yeah, so I started down here. I didn't get too far, but it's a garter stitch, and increase 1 stitch every 4 rounds. The pattern is a free pattern on Ravelry, so if you are interested in it, you know, I'm not ruining any of the secrets, but I was really enjoying this. Oh, so I'm knitting it on a size 4 needle. I started out knitting it on, I really prefer bamboo needles because they're not as slippery, especially with yarn that, I don't know, some of the yarn, especially superwash, tends to be a little more slippery, and I have a hard time. So when I started, I couldn't find my bamboo needles, so I just used some double points because you start out with like 2 or 3 stitches, and then when it was too big for my double points, I put it onto my stainless steel needle. But I did start using a size 5 double point bamboo needle, and then I went up. I knew that my gauge would be a lot looser because of the slipperiness of it, so I went down to a 4. Now the pattern actually I think calls for a 6 and an 8, which seems really loose to me, especially because I am not getting gauge even with going down to a 4. I'm still getting fewer stitches per inch than they recommend. So I'm kind of playing a little yarn chicken here too, trying to, hopefully I have enough to finish the pattern, but I'm living on the edge. So yeah, so that is Spring Thing by Espace Tricot. Here's the little mini skein that I'm going to use with it when I get that far. It is very tonal purples and pinks and browns, and this one too hopefully will be making its way back to the shop in the not so distant future. This was an oops that I'm going to try to recreate as well. So that is it for my works in progress. So not too much crafting this week, but I did have a little bit to share with you in my other segments. So in the pots, I have not started dyeing yet, but thanks to all you wonderful people who have supported me through the sale, I will be starting up again soon and getting some more undyed yarn in, as well as I'm very excited that I finally took the plunge and purchased a spin dryer, which seems not very, I don't know, I guess I always thought they were more expensive than they were, but I'm super excited because it will allow me to get my yarn drier and I won't have to rely on having a place to have it drip dry. So I'm excited about that. I can work a little faster and a little more efficiently because I let my skeins dry between mordanting, which is the process that happens before you dye. When you're using natural dyes, you have to pre-mordant it in order for the dyes to stick to the wool. And then the other thing I wanted to share is that I am looking at creating an advent calendar of sorts. I think what I'd like to do this first year to see if there's interest is to do something a little bit smaller than the full 24 skeins. For one, it will just be easier for me to come up with 12 colors versus 24 or 25. But for two, for really another reason, is that I love the idea of advent calendars and being able to open them every day, but I also understand that it can be very cost prohibitive to a lot of people because they can get really expensive. That's a lot of yarn to come into your stash in 1 month. And it's a lot of work to put them together with all the little goodies and the individually wrapped and things. So I'm going to start a little bit smaller. I want to do a 12 days of Christmas, and we'll have goodies that'll be included in it and all that sort of stuff. So I'm kind of having fun right now, brainstorming ideas. I really would like to highlight some local makers as far as the other goodies that I include. So I'm doing some reconnaissance mission stuff, trying to figure out what sort of things I'd like to include. So if you have any ideas, you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them below, or if you're just interested in the idea of having a naturally dyed 12 days of Christmas, you can just say, yes, I love that idea, and put that below as well. I love to hear your comments and your thoughts. But that's kind of where I'm thinking my plans are for the near future. And then also my youngest son, Lincoln, who's 9, he loves to dye stuff with me. So Lincoln and I are working on a special project together that will hopefully come out closer to later spring. So probably May, I'm thinking. We'll see how it goes. as we work on it together. But that will be really fun. But as far as actually dyeing, I have not dyed anything. I'm waiting for my spin dryer to come, which should be this week, and then I will be hopefully getting back into the pots. On the farm, we do actually have some activity going on the farm, and hopefully after I film this today is Saturday, March 6th, we are starting, it's the first day we're starting grape pruning. So we have about 640 Concord grapevines, and every spring in the month of March, usually, as it warms up, it's usually March, sometimes it goes to April, sometimes we have to do it earlier depending on the weather, but this year it's pretty normal when we're starting. But we have to prune all those grapevines, and it's quite a process, and I will try to get a little footage of what that looks like and either put it in here or at the end of the video so you can see us at work. So that's pretty much all we're doing outside right now. In the kitchen, we have been continuing to cook lots of yummy things. One of the things that I wanted to share this week with you is a recipe we're actually having this evening. It's one of our favorite quick recipes that looks fancy and maybe tastes kind of fancy, but really isn't. So it is called spinach pesto. What I love about this recipe is that it is very simple and it uses ingredients that are much more readily available at your grocery store. So for instance, typical pesto, I believe, is made with basil. And basil leaves are great, and you can get them at the store any time of year, but in the large quantities that you need for a pesto, usually it's more cost effective to do that in the summer. Well, this recipe uses spinach as well. Well, actually, mostly it's spinach, and then you can add in some basil if you want. That's either dried or you can add in fresh basil as well. But so it mostly takes spinach, and then you have your garlic and salt, pepper, a little bit of basil, and then I believe it has a little bit of lemon juice in it. Can't remember exactly, but I will put the recipe below. I have to remember, I like to tweak recipes. I am a non-recipe follower. That's the kind of cook I am. I usually sort of follow it, but if it's missing something, I will just season it, and I don't always write it down. And I don't always remember it to be able to tell, like my husband, if I'm in town and he calls and he says, "Oh, what's for dinner? Do you want me to make something?" And I say, "Oh yeah, make this." And then he looks at the recipe and he's like, "This doesn't taste or look exactly like when you make it. What's different?" And I won't always know what to tell him because I'm not like in the kitchen doing the cooking. So I have a cat here who may try to sneak on camera. Anyway, I don't remember exactly, but since I'm making it tonight, I will remember exactly and I will put it in the notes below. But it is a fabulous pesto. You don't have to cook it. You take your raw spinach leaves, you wash them, you put everything in a food processor. You food process it until it gets to be like a thick sauce, and then you just make some plain pasta and you serve it with the pesto. And then you could add Parmesan cheese on it if you want or not, or you can make bread with it or whatever, but it is super quick. I think it takes like 5-10 minutes to actually do the washing and the processing in your food processor. Oh, it also has walnuts in it, I believe. That's an important part of the pesto that I forgot. The nuts. So again, walnuts are a lot easier to find than like pine nuts usually, at least in my opinion. And they're generally a little cheaper. So anyway, spinach pesto, really yummy, really quick recipe that we love to eat at our house. And then the last section that I wanted, little tidbit I wanted to share with you for in the classroom this week is a group, or I should say it's like a resource. I don't know, it's a group of videos. It's a resource. Crash Course, it's called, and maybe some of you have heard of it before if you have children. But Crash Course is I think they're technically a nonprofit. They started on public television, I believe, and it's two brothers, John and Hank Green, that started it originally, and now they have over, like, I think I read they have over 32 different courses that they use or that they've produced. And so what it is there's all different topics, from geography to literature to world history to US history. I think there's like physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, US government. There's just tons of them. I think one of my sons even did like an artificial intelligence. There is a, what's that one called? The navigating, it's called digital information, I think. And that one is fabulous for anyone. It's not as many videos. The series only has maybe 5 or 6 videos in it, but it talks about all of the things you need to kind of watch out for if you're on the internet, how you can tell if a site is more reliable or less reliable. It was a fascinating series. Well, anyway, the series that my son is working on right now that I specifically wanted to mention is European history. That one has, I want to say it has like 40 or 45 episodes, and each episode is really brief, like 10 to 15 minutes, but he's been really liking that one. And then he also just finished American or US government, I think it's called. Both of those are really good. And so he's working on right now in European history. We got to World War II and the Holocaust, and so we've had some really great conversations. We've had some sad conversations, but it's a great crash course. Even if you're not a student, if you're an adult, like I love to go through them just for myself to learn something, and I try as much as possible to keep up with the episodes that my children are doing, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. There's not enough time in the day, but they're funny and they're fun to watch. So crash course, I think 2 of my favorites would be the US government one, and then also the histories. There's a US history and there's a world history. There's also the European history. So there's just something about, not to get on too much of a tangent, but there's something about how when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, the way that history was taught, I hated history. I hated it because all it was memorizing facts, memorizing dates. There was no story in it. But if anybody really knows and thinks about history, if we stop for a moment and think about history, history is about stories. It's about people, and it's about how those people lived and survived and thrived with whatever was going on in the world. So to have a history course without story is like pointless, in my opinion. So anyway, these crash course programs are great. They introduce you to part of the story, and then what we do is if it's something sparks your interest or it's a topic that you want to know more about, then we go to some more primary sources written from the time period, or maybe right now we went to the United States Holocaust Museum site where we're reading more about the history of how Hitler came to power and what was happening with the Jews and all that kind of stuff. So great program, and someday I'm going to actually watch them all and do all the little activities myself, so that way I remember everything that is taught in them. So I am a historical fiction fan. That is my favorite genre to listen to, so not surprising that I would like the history ones best. Well, that's it, I think. I told you this episode is going to be quite a bit shorter than my previous ones, but I think that's okay because, if I come to you more frequently, then the episodes are going to be a little shorter because I just don't have as much to talk to you about. But I hope you are all well and are hopefully seeing some sunshine and enjoying that, staying healthy, getting your vaccine for COVID-19 if you have that option yet, and I look forward to seeing you in another week or so. So until then, take care and have a great time crafting, cooking, making, enjoying the outdoors. Bye-bye.